Are you looking for an edge, flexible income, and immediate professional respect? Discover the hidden opportunity of becoming a public official with the book, Becoming a Notary by Derrick Spruill. This beginner's guide provides the universal roadmap to launch your new career. You will learn the core mission of deterring fraud, the essential tools of the trade, and exactly how to protect yourself while building a respected business. Get your copy of Becoming a Notary on Amazon, and step into a rewarding profession.
Imagine sitting in a completely sterile, fluorescent-lit hospital room. The monitors are beeping.
Yeah, that classic tense environment.
Right. And a man is lying in the bed, heavily medicated, barely keeping his eyes open. And standing over him is this quote-unquote helpful relative.
Oh, the helpful relative.
Yeah.
Always a red flag.
Always. And they're practically forcing a pen into the patient's hand, urgently whispering that he needs to sign this property deed right now or the whole family loses everything.
Wow.
And you are standing right there. Your official stamp is hovering over the paperwork. So do you stamp it or do you walk away?
I mean, it is a scenario that plays out far more often than people realize, honestly. And it goes straight to the heart of what it actually means to hold this commission.
Welcome to Notary Knowledge. I am your host. And if you are an entry-level novice notary listening to us right now and, excluding California-specific laws for today, maybe you're looking to build your confidence before you face a situation exactly like that hospital room. Well, you are in the right place.
Exactly.
Today is Foundational Friday. We are doing an exploration into the anatomy of a certificate. And we're relying on a stack of expert sources today, specifically Derrick Spruill's Notary Knowledge, Reference Guide and Notary Bible, along with the Notary Public Foundation Guidelines and the Mobile Notary Blueprint.
And, if there is one core philosophy driving every single page of those sources, like a mantra you really need to internalize before you ever ink your stamp, it is this: good enough is not a thing.
Which is such a critical shift in mindset, right? Because there's this massive misconception in the public eye, and honestly, sometimes even among novices, that a notary is basically just an administrative stamp robot.
Oh, completely. Just a rubber stamp.
Right. Like you glance at a driver's license, you push rubber onto paper, collect a small fee, and you leave. But the reality painted by these sources is that you are a vital shield.
You are. You really are.
You're the frontline safeguard against legal error and, highly sophisticated fraud in the commercial sector. You are literally the protector of the public record.
Yeah, the precision required, it just goes so far beyond basic identification. It is fundamentally about risk mitigation for the entire financial and legal system.
Right.
I mean, if you just aim for, good enough when assessing a signer, you leave the door wide open for devastating financial loss, crippling liability, and frankly, completely invalidated legal documents.
So we really need to figure out how you build that shield. And to do that, you first have to understand the literal anatomy of the documents you are dealing with.
Absolutely.
Because a perfect fraud detection radar is useless if you don't even know what legal act you're performing.
So let's look at the two most common and probably most dangerously confused acts: the acknowledgement and the jurat.
They are constantly conflated, and that's incredibly dangerous because they serve vastly different legal functions.
Let's start with the acknowledgement.
Okay, so its primary function is authenticating identity and voluntariness.
Yeah.
And the key word there is voluntariness, free will.
Okay.
This is the act used when transferring major interests like real estate deeds, mortgages, or powers of attorney. Wait, let me just make sure I understand the mechanics of this because this trips up so many people. For an acknowledgement, the signer doesn't actually have to sign the document right in front of you, do they?
Nope, they don't.
They could literally sign it at home while watching TV, wrote to you 3 days later, and that is perfectly legal.
Yes, it is. And the reason why that is legal is crucial here. In an acknowledgement, you are not witnessing the physical act of the pen hitting the paper.
Okay, so what are you witnessing?
You are witnessing the signer, acknowledging the signature. They are looking you in the eye and declaring, yes, that is my signature, and yes, I signed this of my own free will.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, you are authenticating their intent, not the exact moment of signing.
That makes total sense, but it also means you can't just guess what act you're supposed to perform based on, the vibe of the room.
Exactly. No guessing allowed.
You really have to scan the certificate for specific linguistic markers. If someone slides a deed across the table, You are hunting for trigger words like acknowledged or personally appeared or executed the same.
Right. Now, contrast that entirely with a jurat. A jurat shifts the focus from free will to the absolute truthfulness of the document's contents.
Truthfulness. So.
Yeah, you see this with affidavits, sworn statements, depositions, and because truthfulness is on the line, the mechanics change completely. The signer must sign the document in your physical presence.
So wait, if they bring an affidavit to me that they already signed at home on their couch, I have to make them sign it again, right there in front of me.
Usually right next to or below the original signature, yeah. But the signature is only half the requirement.
Right, there's more.
The absolute defining mechanism of a jurat is the mandatory verbal oath or affirmation. You must administer an oath, and the signer has to give an audible affirmative response.
They can't just nod their head.
No, they cannot just nod.
Okay, so when looking at the paperwork, the trigger words for a jurat are usually subscribed and sworn to.
Right, exactly.
Because subscribed literally just means signed below, which proves they signed it in front of you, and sworn to confirms the oath part.
You got it.
The way I kind of like to visualize the difference is this. The acknowledgement is like a bouncer at an exclusive club.
Okay, I like that.
The bouncer checks your ID, makes sure you are who you say you are, and confirms you actually want to walk through the doors. The jurat, on the other hand, is like being put on the witness stand in a courtroom. You are literally raising your right hand under penalty of perjury.
The bouncer versus the witness stand perfectly captures that qualitative difference. One is about identity and access, and the other is about binding truth.
But let me play devil's advocate for a second here.
Go for it.
Let's say a notary gets flustered. They have a signer aggressively rushing them, tapping their watch, just creating chaos. And the notary just grabs whichever certificate stamp is closest on their desk. Does it really matter that much if the ID was checked and the person is who they say they are?
Oh, it matters immensely. It completely destroys the document.
Wait, really? Destroys it?
Yes. Let's trace the legal fallout of that mistake. If you perform an acknowledgement when a jurat is statutorily required, say, on a sworn affidavit for a massive court case, that document can be thrown out by a judge.
Because the oath was missing?
Exactly, because the signer was never placed under a verbal oath. The legal teeth to the document rely entirely on the threat of perjury, and you, as the notary, never activated that threat.
So if the person flat out lied on that affidavit, they can't be held legally accountable for perjury because the notary failed to administer the oath? I mean, you basically just gave a fraudster a get-out-of-jail-free card.
Yeah, you became their shield instead of the public shield, and substituting these acts creates massive liability for you and potentially ruins your client's entire legal standing.
Wow. Okay, we are going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we'll get into the actual tactics of the notary fraud shield. Stick with us.
We'll be right back.
And we are back. So before the break, we talked about bulletproofing the paperwork. We know the difference between the acts, but frankly, a perfectly executed acknowledgement certificate is entirely useless if the ID sitting on top of it is a counterfeit.
100%.
And that's where the notary fraud shield strategies come into play. We really have to read the people, not just the paper.
Because fraudsters, they rely heavily on the psychology of the mobile professional. They know that a mobile notary is often trying to provide 5-star customer service,
Right, trying to be accommodating.
Trying to be accommodating, probably rushing to their next appointment. They weaponize your desire to be helpful.
I was looking at the fraud guidelines and the sources, and they place a massive emphasis on checking for peeling edges on an ID card. And I assume that's because counterfeiters aren't usually printing entirely new plastic cards from scratch.
Exactly. The physical mechanics of forgery often involve taking a stolen, legitimate ID and physically laminating a new layer of false information right over the top.
Oh, yeah.
But fraudsters rarely have access to the industrial-grade heat sealers used by the DMV. So if you run your thumb along the edge of the card and feel a ridge or see it peeling, you are likely holding a tampered document.
The sources also mention checking microprinting and holograms. And microprinting is fascinating to me because it's text printed so incredibly small that to the naked eye, it just looks like a solid line.
Right. And the reason it's such an effective security feature is that standard commercial inkjet or laser printers, they just cannot replicate it.
They bleed ink, right?
Exactly, they bleed ink. Only highly specialized, really expensive intaglio printing presses can achieve that crisp microtext. If you look at it under a loupe and it's blurry, it's fake.
But the physical tools of fraud are really just the tip of the iceberg, honestly. The behavioral ploys are what really manipulate a situation, like that helper tactic we mentioned at the very beginning with our hospital scenario.
Oh, the helper is the most insidious psychological ploy. This is a third party, a son, a business partner, maybe a caregiver, who insists on answering every single question you direct at the signer.
Yeah.
They might even hold the ID and try to hand it to themselves. Their entire goal is to run interference, so you do not notice that the actual signer is confused, incapacitated, or just unwilling.
And they almost always pair that helper tactic with false urgency, right? They'll say, we lose the house if you don't stamp this right this second, or the bank wire cuts off in 10 minutes.
Yeah.
I assume the psychology there is just to get your adrenaline pumping so your fight or flight response kicks in, which literally shuts down the critical thinking centers of your prefrontal cortex.
That is precisely how it works. They want you stressed, so you skip steps. And this is amplified in those high-stakes environments. Like, if you are in a hospital dealing with medical directives or powers of attorney, your biggest challenge is assessing a vulnerable individual's capacity to understand the acknowledgement.
Right, because how do you differentiate between someone who is just groggy from heavy pain medication and someone who actually lacks the legal capacity to understand what they're signing?
It requires direct, unmediated conversation. You have to ask the signer open-ended questions, not just yes or no questions.
Okay, that makes sense.
And if the helper keeps jumping in, you have to ask them to step out of the room. If the signer cannot articulate what the document does, or if they seem coerced, the Notary Fraud Shield mandates that you halt the process.
And I imagine it's a very similar dynamic in a correctional facility.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
In a jail or prison, you are hyper alert for coercion. An incarcerated signer might be under extreme pressure from someone on the outside controlling their assets, or even someone on the inside. If you sense force, you walk away. Losing one fee is always better than facilitating a forced transfer of assets.
Okay, let's actually put this foundational knowledge to the test. Our sources have a segment called Good Question, What Would You Do?, which throws real-world document dilemmas at us. Let's see how the theory holds up at the desk.
I love this part. Theory is great, but the desk is where the liability is.
Right. Let's look at scenario 1, the ambiguous certificate. A signer slides a document to you. Bold letters at the top declare it is an affidavit. But when you scroll down to the pre-printed certificate language at the bottom, there is no jurat language.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, it doesn't say sworn to. Instead, the text says the signer is appearing and acknowledging their signature.
Okay, so the title demands a jurat, but the actual certificate text is an acknowledgement.
Right, and my instinct as a helpful professional would be to just cross out the acknowledgement text, stamp my jurat, and fix it for them.
And that instinct will get you in profound trouble.
Really?
Yes. You apply the rule of the dominant requirement, meaning the text of the certificate dictates your action. However, because an affidavit inherently requires a sworn oath to function legally, using the acknowledgement certificate will likely cause the receiving agency to reject it entirely.
Ah, I see.
But, and this is the absolute ethical line, you cannot choose to just swap it out for a jurat yourself.
Because choosing the legal act for the client crosses the line into the unauthorized practice of law, right?
Yeah.
You aren't an attorney. You can't prescribe legal medicine.
Exactly. You must point out the discrepancy to the signer and let them choose how to proceed or advise them to contact whoever drafted the document.
Okay, let's run through some rapid-fire scenarios about the surrounding information on the certificate. Clara from Georgia has a document where the pre-printed venue says State of Florida, County of Miami-Dade. But Clara and the signer are physically sitting at a kitchen table in Atlanta, Georgia.
Clara has to correct that venue. The venue is not where the document was drafted. It is the exact geographical footprint of where the notarization is taking place at that exact moment.
Right, because her commission is bound by state lines.
Exactly. She needs to line through Florida, write in Georgia and Fulton County, and initial it. If she leaves it as Florida, she is claiming she performed an act outside our jurisdiction.
Okay, what about Ken from Texas? The signer hands him a document on a Friday, but asks Ken to date his certificate for the following Monday to perfectly match the bank's closing date.
Hard stop. The date on the certificate must reflect the exact day the signer appeared before the notary. Post-dating is timeline fraud.
Wow.
Yeah, it breaks the chain of evidence and can cost Ken his commission entirely.
Here's a tricky one regarding identity. Julie, in Virginia. The name of the driver's license says Jonathan Michael Smith, but the contract is drafted for John M. Smith.
This comes down to the legal chain of identity. The rule of thumb is that the name on the ID must contain the name on the document. Since John is a universally accepted derivative of Jonathan and the middle initial matches, the ID contains more information than the document. That is generally acceptable. But if the document said Jonathan and the ID only said John, she couldn't proceed because the ID lacks sufficient evidence.
Got it. Frank in North Carolina. The document has absolutely no venue listed anywhere on the page.
Frank must add it. A certificate without a venue is fatally flawed. Without it, the document is legally floating in space. There is no proof Frank was operating within his authorized geographic jurisdiction.
Last one. Amy in Florida. She's got a crowded, poorly formatted document, and the only place left to put her official seal will cover up some of the text of the actual contract.
Amy needs to use an attached loose certificate. You must never place a seal over the text of a document or over a signature.
Because that would obscure it.
Right. Obscuring text can legally invalidate the legibility of the contract. She should attach a separate, clean certificate page, staple it securely, and make a note on the original page indicating a certificate is attached.
So, whether you are navigating a tricky hospital signing, fixing a venue error in Georgia, or protecting a document's legibility, your entire practice relies on what the sources call integrity in action.
Yeah, which is a great concept.
And interestingly, that happens to be the new slogan for the Mobile Notary by Derrick Spruill 2026 rebrand.
It is a fitting framework, especially as the profession evolves. I mean, we are moving rapidly into the digital frontier with remote online notarization or ON.
Right.
But what is critical to understand is that the core concepts we just debated, acknowledgments, jurats, capacity, coercion, they remain exactly the same. Only the medium changes.
So let's break down the mechanics of that digital evolution. If I am dealing with a signer through a webcam, how do I check for peeling edges on an ID card? I can't exactly run my thumb over their screen.
No, you can't. In a RON environment, identity proofing relies entirely on algorithms. It uses credential analysis, where the signer holds their ID up to the camera or uploads a high-res scan.
Okay, so the computer does the work.
Exactly. Specialized software analyzes the IDs, microprinting, barcode data, and security features against a massive database of templates to ensure it's not a forgery.
And that is paired with KBA, right? Knowledge-based authentication.
Yes. KBA pulls data from deep within the signer's credit history through data brokers. It generates unique, timed questions that a counterfeiter wouldn't know. Like, which of these 4 addresses did you have a car loan registered to in 2014?
Wow.
It's basically a digital extension of the notary fraud shield.
What about the acts themselves? Does a digital acknowledgement look different from a digital jurat?
Well, for a digital acknowledgement, once the signer passes the identity proofing, they can simply click a button to electronically acknowledge their signature.
Right.
But for a digital jurat, the strictness remains. The signer must be clearly visible on camera, actively applying their electronic signature, and then the notary must administer the verbal oath over the audio-video link and actually hear the affirmative response before applying the digital seal.
You know, embracing these digital tools seems like the only way to scale a modern practice. And the Mobile Notary Blueprint digs deep into how to build a business around this.
Oh, absolutely.
A huge part of that is fee-setting transparency, making sure your clients understand travel fees versus per signature fees, but it's also about building an online presence focused on specialized competence.
That specialization is what separates the professional from the hobbyist. And that is exactly what the 2026 brand redesign for Mobile Notary by Derrick Spruill is trying to capture. They are rolling out a unified visual identity designed to really command institutional authority.
Yeah, I was looking at the new aesthetics. They're moving to a deep navy background, which psychologically projects stability and trust. Stark white typography for absolute clarity, cutting through all the legal jargon. Yeah. And that vibrant red accent that says, by Derrick Spruill.
The visual language is meant to shift the public perception away from the stamp robot and toward a recognized authoritative legal shield.
And they are building an entire ecosystem around that professionalization over at Little Derrick Store online.
They really are.
Listeners can actually buy the Notary Knowledge reference books we've been unpacking today. They have apparel with the good enough is not a thing mantra to keep you grounded, the good question mouse pad designed by Montes for your desk, and even upcoming children's books like the permission slip debacle to teach integrity to the next generation.
I love that. It is a comprehensive toolkit for taking the craft seriously. It reinforces that every time you apply your seal, you are participating in a legal tradition built on absolute trust.
Which brings us to a final thought I want to leave you with as we wrap up this show. We are fully embracing this digital frontier. We have ORN, algorithmic credential analysis, biometric ID checks, and KBA pulling from deep credit files.
Right.
But as these digital tools become increasingly sophisticated, will they make us completely foolproof against fraud? Or is traditional human intuition your sheer ability to look a signer in the eye, sense the tension in a room, and recognize the subtle signs of coercion, something that technology can never truly replace?
That is the defining question for the modern practitioner. Algorithms can verify a piece of plastic, but they cannot verify the human heart or the presence of fear. The tools are only as effective as the intuition of the professional wielding them.
We would love to hear your thoughts on this and any wild scenarios you've run into at the desk. Please rate the show, subscribe, and share this podcast with other entry-level notaries who could use a serious confidence boost.
And if you have specific, complex situations you need help navigating, reach out to us. Email your questions to Derrick at derrickspruill.com. We will try to answer as soon as possible at the end of our shows.
We couldn't put this together without our incredible team. Executive producer Derrick Spruill, lead writer Marylyn Trotter, graphics by Eddie Montes Travis, music by Thomas Bynum, and produced by magnificent Workz Business Solutions.
Keep learning, keep questioning, and keep your shield up.
Don't just be listeners of the knowledge, be doers of the knowledge. This is Notary Knowledge. Until next time.
Since you started your notary business, strive for excellence. Introducing the book, Notary Operational Excellence by Derrick Spruill. Build your business on a beacon of precision and trust with expert advice. Check out Notary Operational Excellence by Derrick Spruill from Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, Books of Million, Bookshop.org, Mobile Notary by DerrickSpruill.com, or download from Kindle today.